Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, more than 466 days on, a ceasefire agreement.
After 15 months of Israel's war on Gaza, negotiators have now reached a ceasefire agreement. According to media reports, celebrations are taking place right across Gaza.
Can this agreement hold, or is it another fragile promise? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. This was the scene in Gaza after the ceasefire was announced. Al Jazeera's Anas al-Sharif stood in the middle of it.
ممكن أن نخلع هذه الخوذة ميادة التي أرهقتني طوال هذه الفترة وأيضا هذا الدرع الذي كان جزء من جسدي خلال هذه المدة وخلال هذه الفترة.
In his live report from Gaza City, he says, I can finally take off my heavy helmet and vest that have exhausted me throughout the war.
هذا الإعلان ووقف إطلاق النار للمواطنين ولكل سكان غزة الذين.
He spoke for many Palestinians as they reacted to this long-awaited news.
It's good. Thank God. The ceasefire reassured us and brought us joy. Thank God. It's nice and filled with happiness. May it last forever, God willing.
We are here happy with this victory because the Palestinian people simply want their freedom. Freedom for the Palestinian people. We don't want anything but freedom and to live with dignity without occupation.
The reason that so many people are happy is because despite their efforts to try to crush Palestinians, they didn't in the end. They didn't. All that they did was inflict a ton of damage and carry out a genocide. But they didn't crush the Palestinian will to want to live freely.
My guest today, a familiar voice on The Take over the past 15 months, has also been waiting and watching closely for this moment. She's joining me from Doha, where negotiations have been taking place.
My name is Diana Buttu. I'm a lawyer based in Haifa, but currently in Doha.
Diana, welcome back to The Take. It's really good to have you here on this day especially. You are in Doha, where the ceasefire agreement was just announced moments ago. How are you feeling?
It's a mix of feelings. Everything from relieved that the bombing campaign will finally stop, that Israel's genocide is finally going to come to a close, but also worried and sad, worried about what's next, worried that Israel isn't going to fulfill its end of the agreement, worried that it's not going to release Palestinian prisoners, worried that they won't actually withdraw, worried that they will continue to bomb. And then also sad that we've just been through 15 months of genocide and seen how the world has done absolutely nothing to stop this genocide and to see Israel get away with it. So it's just a mix of feelings, but overwhelmingly, it's a feeling of relief that at least finally I can feel that the end of this genocide is coming.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if this time feels different for you, or if it feels a little bit like deja vu, because we all saw a very short-lived truce deal, a so-called humanitarian pause back in November of 2023. And that brought similar hopes, but it had an end date, and it only lasted less than a week.
The ceasefire, always fragile, now shattered. Here in Rafah, in Gaza's far south, children are bundled into overcrowded beds. Along with the blood and dust on their faces, pain, fear and confusion of life in what is once again an active war zone.
So what is different about this time?
I don't know if there is anything different this time, and that's what my worry is. So the one good thing is that there will be a stop. The other positive thing is that we are seeing that there are going to be guarantors, unlike in the one that was in November of 2023, and the guarantors being Qatar and Egypt and the United States. But I'm also very worried because having been in the negotiating room with the Israelis on a number of occasions and having lived in Palestine, the devil is in the details. And not only is the devil in the details, it requires sustained pressure on Israel to make sure that it fulfills its end of the bargain. And we've just never seen that ever happen. So my big fear is that there is going to be a cessation just for as long enough to get the Israeli captives returned. But then I'm afraid that it's just going to go back to Israel bombing Gaza all over again. But it's not just about Gaza. Israel's eyes are not just on Gaza. They're also on the West Bank. Over the course of the past 15 months, that Israel's confiscated more land in these 15 months than it did in the 20 years that preceded this. So I'm afraid that as people are watching Gaza, that we're going to see the continued ethnic cleansing process in the West Bank. And so while I say I'm happy, because I genuinely am happy, I can see from my friends who live in Gaza, all of them who've either been displaced, who are injured, who've had their homes destroyed. Some of them have been killed. All of them have lost loved ones. I know that they are feeling relief tonight, as they should. And at the same time, there's still a lot of fear.
Yeah. I saw videos of people prostrating and thanks to God, people cheering, people singing. But there's also skepticism. There's also a hesitancy. There's also just still the reminder of death and destruction all around them.
Everywhere. And life will never be normal for them. How do you come back from this? And people are cheering because they've survived genocide. This was a genocide that Israel really sought to wipe out all of Gaza and the people who are in Gaza. And so people are happy because they've survived. And I think when the reality kicks in of seeing all the destruction and seeing what's around them, they're undoubtedly having these same feelings.
So I wonder, Deanna, why now? Because back in August of 2024, we heard U.S. President Joe Biden say a Gaza ceasefire deal was closer than ever. Fast forward, here we are, beginning of 2025. Why do you think this has finally happened?
I think because there's a few reasons. One is it's very clear that this was not just Israel's genocide, that this was Israel's genocide where Israel was aided and abetted by the United States. The weapons were coming from the United States. The diplomatic support was coming from the United States. The financial support was coming from the United States. And from the beginning, so many people were saying that it would have just required the U.S. president to say stop, and it would have stopped. But this president didn't want to stop it. This president wanted to see the genocide continue. Why it's changing now is entirely unclear. But what I do know is that this could have stopped a long time ago. When you read the text of this agreement, it very much mirrors the previous agreements. It mirrors not only August, but May of 2024, and it mirrors the structure of March of 2024 as well. So there was a time where this could have been stopped a long, long, long time ago, but this U.S. president did not care to stop it, and instead went all in to make sure that he aided and abetted this genocide.
You know, you tweeted just that, and I found it really timely even then. A couple of days ago, you wrote on X, this is the same deal that was agreed to back in March of 2024. Yes. Simple words, but that means thousands of lives in the interim of those times. So I know you said we don't know, and we likely may never know exactly why now, but what is the cynic in you, the lawyer who's looking at this with a fine-tooth comb? What is it saying?
The cynic in me and the lawyer in me, which are sometimes not the same, by the way, I'm looking at this and seeing that there's a bigger prize to be had. I think that Trump wants to be able to come in and say that he secured a deal. And at the same time, he wants to be able to give the Israelis a lot of things, everything from the West Bank to going on and giving him carte blanche to attack other countries in the region as well. So I don't think that this came out of a vacuum. What bothers me in all of this is that not only was the same outline as in March of 2024, but when you look at the destruction, everything from tens of thousands of people to the flattening of the largest Palestinian city, Gaza City, to wiping off the map places like Jabalia and Beit Hanun, to making so many people homeless. 88% of the buildings in Gaza have either been flattened or sustained some severe damage. Wow. To the trauma on the children. All of that has happened throughout this period, and I really worry about Israel not being held to account.
More with Deanna after the break. Okay, so let's talk about what we know is in the deal, or at least this first phase of the deal. There are 3 phases involving things like the release of captives from Israel held by Hamas, the release of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, and the eventual withdrawal of the Israeli military from Gaza. What should we know about this deal and its phases?
So there are those 3 phases. Each phase lasts about 6 weeks. And in the first phase, we're really talking about Israel stopping bombing, Israel stopping its surveillance over the Gaza Strip for a period of between 10 to 12 hours. They're also talking about, in the first phase, releasing the Israelis in exchange for Palestinians being released, with the focus first being on women and children. There's also in that first phase a focus on allowing humanitarian aid trucks to come in order to get as much aid and reconstruction in Gaza as possible. The second and third phases focus more on the idea of territory. And in that idea of territory, how far back it is that Israel's going to withdraw. And then, of course, the third phase, just building on all of that. So what we know right now is just that first phase, which focuses on the release of prisoners and the release of the Israelis. It focuses on getting humanitarian aid in, and it focuses on stopping the bombing. But beyond that, there are a lot of specific details that are missing. For example, what happens if Israel reneges? What happens if Israel doesn't withdraw? While there are guarantors listed, what do those guarantees mean? What does it mean to have a guarantor? What if the trucks are not allowed in? It's those details that we should be worried about, because ultimately what got us to this point was the fact that Palestinians have been denied their freedom for all of these decades. And Palestinians finally said that they were done with it. And so to go back to the same scenario, or to make it even worse than it was on the eve of October of 2023, is only a recipe for disaster. The problem is that Israel has never gotten out, in terms of its mentality, this idea of perpetual control. They seem to believe that the only way that there can be safety and security for them if they're perpetually controlling and making Palestinians completely insecure. And so these are the things that I'm very worried about, is that I don't see that it's linked to anything that is longer term. And given that the phases are so vague, and given that there's so much left to negotiate in them, it really leaves me wondering whether this will be sustainable.
We're speaking just a couple hours before midnight in Doha, where you are and where this was announced. So what do we know about when this will actually be implemented? When does it start?
So this is the part where it's a little bit complicated. So first, the agreement has to go through Israel's cabinet. It will likely be approved by the broader Israeli cabinet. There are some Israeli members who are cabinet members who are threatening to leave the coalition. But then after that, because there are Palestinian prisoners whose names are going to be released, the Israelis have a system in which they release those names, and there's a 48-hour appeal process in which anybody can try to stop the release of these Palestinian political prisoners. So we're probably looking at the earliest as being Monday for the first for this first phase to begin.
Wow.
Exactly.
That fills me with dread because that's a lot of time for more death.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if history has shown us anything, is that it's always on the eve of these ceasefire that we see that Israel takes its final shots. And in taking its final shots, it's not a gradual easing, it's quite the opposite. Already, as the foreign minister was announcing the agreement, the Israelis were bombing in parts of Gaza.
Right. And in the very lead up to the ceasefire, Israel stepped up its attacks, and they killed at least 62 people in a 24-hour period.
The bombardment continues relentlessly across Gaza Strip, from Jabalia in the north to Rafah in the south. These attacks come despite ceasefire negotiations that could bring long-awaited peace.
Well, Deanna, you are usually based in Haifa. So I want to go to what you touched on about the Israeli War Cabinet and talk about how this might play and be playing within Israeli domestic politics, where many voices are reportedly against this deal. So the far right, which is part of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling coalition, certainly is, but also members of his own Likud party. What do you take from that? What could happen next, given that?
And he is also of the far right. I think that people try to label him as something other than he is. He's also a part of the far right. If he wasn't, then he wouldn't be adopting the policies that they've put forward. Look, there are members within that cabinet, and they're far right, they're fascist, people who call for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, who are upset with this. And the reason that they're upset with this is for two reasons. One is that any ceasefire agreement means that they haven't completely and totally decimated and flattened Gaza and killed every single Gazan there. Remember, these were members who said there are no innocents in Gaza, who were tweeting things like kill them all. But the other reason is because this is going to require that Palestinian prisoners be freed. And that's another thing that they don't want. So there are some members in his cabinet who are threatening to leave the cabinet, threatening to leave the coalition. If they leave the coalition, then that's the end of this government, and it will trigger new elections. To be honest, though, I don't think that that's going to happen, because while they are threatening to leave, there are a significant number of people who want to see this deal come to fruition, not out of love for Palestinians, but because of the impact that this has had on Israel. Everything from a shattered economy to soldiers that are coming back in body bags, to this idea of endless war, to being isolated internationally, to being ostracized. And so Israelis, not out of love for us, but out of their own self-interest, do want to see this come to an end. And so while I see that these members are going to express their extreme displeasure with any ceasefire agreement, I'm not entirely sure that they're going to pull out of the government. I think it's probably a lot more talk than actual reality.
Right. And picking up on what you're saying, just as we saw scenes of tempered celebration in Gaza, we also saw scenes from Tel Aviv and across Israel of the families of captives and others who are also celebrating and pushing for this and have been calling for a deal, whether or not it has anything to do with the actual attacks and killing in Gaza is separate, but the push for a deal has been happening, as you've said.
Exactly.
As we wrap up here and look towards the days ahead and what they could mean, I wonder, for you, what does the international community owe Gaza and Palestinians after over a year of carnage?
Where do I begin? One of the things that has been so difficult is watching the ways in which much of the West has just accepted the slaughter of Palestinians without, it's just become so normalized. And it's everything from the statements that they make to the fact that they haven't held a single Israeli official accountable, to the fact that there's still a weapons supply that's flowing into Israel. The fact that Palestinians have done everything from going to try to take Israel to court through the ICJ to the ICC to trying to push for the stopping of weapons, the flow of weapons, to demonstrating. Palestinians have done everything, and the world has responded. And by the world, I'm just talking about the Western world, with just showing how much the killing of Palestinians is okay and normal. And it says a lot when the Western world allows genocide to happen and is not even willing to confront the people who are carrying it out. And for me personally, living amongst Israelis, I normally live in Haifa, and hearing them talk about killing Palestinians and watching them post on TikTok and Instagram and other social media what they've done to us. And it's not just posting it, but posting it with glee and posting it with this sense of impunity. The world owes us a lot. And I don't know if Palestinians are ever going to forgive the Western world for what they've done to us over the course of the past 15 months. I don't know if that's possible. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. And as I've said, if Israel can get away with this, it can get away with anything.
And that's the take. For the past 15 months, we've had our eyes on Israel's war on Gaza. If you want to dig deeper and learn how we got here, be sure to scroll back in our YouTube playlist so you can check out those episodes. And don't forget to give this episode a like so more people can find it. We'll be back tomorrow.